Hi, I'm Tommy Thompson and welcome to Design Dive here on AI in Games. In recent years, a hot topic within the games industry is the adoption of microtransactions, where players are encouraged to spend money on a variety of small add-ons that can change cosmetic appearance of characters or outright influence the overall experience. In addition, you've had loot boxes, where you don't know what item you're getting until you take the gamble and open the box. Throughout this current generation of gaming, we've seen a significant increase in these monetization models being employed in large-scale commercial titles without appropriate consideration, to a point that it's received significant backlash not just from players, but it has now invoked the ire of governments around the world, and regulation is hot on everyone's mind. In this episode, I want to dive into this issue, why it's so problematic, but more importantly for me, the clear and present danger that AI presents to consumers as it's adopted in these monetization systems. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, I want to make 2 points. First, let me stress that the points I'm making are not based on evidence I've found of specific AI applications to microtransactions and loot boxes in commercial games, but rather an argument based on my knowledge and understanding of this industry, how game publishers aggressively pursue in-game monetization, and how these machine learning technologies can be employed in this space. So, while this is purely conjecture on my part, it's an educated argument, or at least, I like to think it is, and I strongly imagine that some of what I'm suggesting is either on the horizon, if not already underway. Secondly, as you'll notice throughout this video, my focus is on the behaviour of publishers, not developers. Game developers often receive the bulk of criticism and then subsequently harassment for something they have little to no say in as a game is being built, and that is frankly unacceptable. In my experience, developers are, like players, often having to work around the realities of having these microtransactions injected into the games they're involved with. As such, if you have a bone to pick with the topics of this video, you take it to the publisher, and more importantly, you speak with your wallet. You don't like what's happening here, don't spend the money. So let's go back to the beginning. Microtransactions are, as the name implies, an effort to have players of a game spend small amounts of money as part of the ongoing interaction enjoyment of the product. These small purchases often are tied to elements that are cosmetic in nature, such as costumes for characters, or they can have some actual value in the context of the game itself. This could mean extra lives in Candy Crush, or new characters in a game such as Marvel Contest of Champions. The concept arose predominantly from mobile gaming in late 2000s, where instead of selling games at a specific price point, they're completely free to download. But your ability to progress in these games and the rate at which you do so is often heavily tied to the amount of real-world money players inject into it. This is certainly a popular and lucrative format, but it requires players to continue to invest their time and, more importantly, their cash into the game itself, with this leading to a variety of complex and convoluted economies emerging in these games to not only reinforce the need to spend money, but obfuscate the true value of the money being spent and how valuable the items are that you're spending money on. This has been compounded by the loot box, an idea that existed in mobile gaming for, best part of 10 years before being popularised in the console and PC gaming market by Overwatch, published by Activision Blizzard. In each instance, players open a box that has one or more items of potential value to players. These boxes can typically be earned through in-game activity, but at a relatively slow pace. However, they can more easily be attained by spending money within the game's economy. In each instance, the probability of a valuable item is often incredibly low, and only now are games being forced in some markets to display the probabilities of attaining the most lucrative items on offer. All of these practices have continued to evolve and mutate as they thrive not just in mobile, but also in console and PC gaming spaces. However, there has been some pushback as it moves further into the PC and console markets, given that these economies are being injected into paid products. Players have already spent, say, 40 quid or $60 on the game, with publishers subsequently trying to squeeze more cash out of their players. Much of the AAA game industry, most notably Activision, Take-Two Interactive and Electronic Arts, has embraced this. While the argument is often made that these microtransactions are a reality brought on by the ever-increasing costs of game development, many of these publishers have seen revenues and in turn profits skyrocket, largely due to in-game monetization. One need only look at Electronic Arts' FIFA and Madden franchises, where the Ultimate Team component of these games, where players purchase random digital cards based on real-world sports stars, garnered $1.1 billion of revenue in 2018. That's more than the boxed games themselves, and account not just for 50% of all revenue from digital products by the publisher, but is also 21% of EA's total revenue for that fiscal year. Publishers want microtransactions to stay because they're making them a lot of money, and they'll go to great efforts to achieve it. It's been a huge point of consternation for players, given the impact it has on how games are designed, and the psychological manipulation that becomes laced throughout a given title in an effort to encourage you to spend money. In a previous design dive on Dark Souls, I discussed how games build reward loops and feedback systems to encourage continued play and provide a sense of progression. While this typically is laced into player performance and perseverance in the case of Dark Souls, many economy-driven games either stifle or limit that progression without a further injection of cash, or outright inhibit it. While many publishers, and strangely the players who play their games, often defend these practices given the additions found in microtransactions and loot boxes are cosmetic in nature, it is a deliberate choice that inhibits a player's engagement or enjoyment. Cosmetic items are often heavily tied into the social element of play in these games. You'll note that most loot box heavy games are ones with online multiplayer, whereby you're not just defeating the enemy team, but you're doing it while showing off your cosmetic bling. This adds social stigma to an existing pressure to engage in the monetization, given it creates fashion trends within the ecosystem of the game. This might seem trivial to some, but in the case of games such as Fortnite, it can actually lead to bullying in schools towards kids who don't spend money given their default for wearing the free original skins. Everywhere you go, monetization-laden games are deliberately constructed to steer players towards in-game purchases, with lucrative offers made early in a game to get you on board, as well as periodic deals that encourage you to maybe put down a few bob here and there to get that item you wanted. This, combined with the obfuscation of the in-game economy, can have a crippling effect on players and their wallets, particularly if the player in question suffers from, say, a gambling addiction, or they're a child and don't understand what they're getting into. In-game monetization is not restricted in accordance with player age. As such, when games like FIFA are rated by the PEGI and ESRB rating bodies as safe for children, they don't factor the monetization systems involved. Plus, in some instances, publishers such as Activision frequently add the monetization system as an update to the game after it is rated and released in an effort to avoid negative press in the build-up to launch. All of this further adding to the confusion and surreptitiously driving you towards spending money. In addition to all this is the Battle Pass approach. This is adopted in the likes of free-to-play games like Dota 2 and is very popular in Battle Royale games like Fortnite and Apex Legends. But they are rather upfront about what they're doing, given it's clear what you're paying for as well as what you can attain. However, they're actually still a bit nasty, I think, given they're essentially a purchase that requires a time commitment, given that the unlocks within a Battle Pass are often not available after the original gameplay season that pass is associated with. Now, in late 2019, we're seeing this begin to reach a critical juncture, as publishers brazenly slap more and more microtransactions on premium $60 products aimed at children without fear of reprisal. However, gambling commissions and governments around the world are now looking to intervene. While some countries have outright banned loot box behaviour, given the principle of spending money, albeit indirectly, for a random reward is tantamount to gambling, others, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, are now investigating what new forms of legislation could and should be implemented to protect vulnerable individuals from what is an otherwise quite predatory behaviour. This has resulted in the likes of EA and Epic Games being brought forward to speak at committee level of the UK government. This is a pretty scary proposition, as EA act like a bunch of chancers by drawing parallels to the likes of Kinder Eggs and collectible card games in an effort to normalise their behaviour as surprise mechanics, which is, professionally speaking, a load of old horse shit. So why am I talking about all of this? 2 words: player analytics. It's a process where you gather up data en masse about the behaviour of players within your game in order to better understand what they're doing and how they're going about it. Over on the main AI in Games series, I've explored analytics a couple of times already, with the likes of the PsyOps project being able to establish how players adopt specific gameplay responsibilities in Battlefield depending on their personality, or more critically, their age. Meanwhile, the video exploring research in Tomb Raider Underworld highlighted one of the first real efforts by developers to understand what is happening in their game after it's released into the wild by reading data from players over the Xbox Live network. But perhaps more critically, is the episode from back in 2017 where I explored academic research that examined the Team Fortress 2 hat economy. As we explored in the episode, there are distinct correlations that can be established from perceived social status in the game's ecosystem to the quality of virtual items they possess and the distinct profiles of players that exist within that space, ranging from those that are simply uninterested to those who crave attaining the most lucrative items. Perhaps most critically, is the research itself warns of sociological issues that can emerge when social dynamics intersect with virtual economies, with the very real threat of privilege and marginalisation emerging in these communities, exactly what's happening now in Fortnite. Now, all of these research projects are comparatively quite old now. The Team Fortress and Battlefield research date back to around 2012-2013, while the Tomb Raider Underworld project dates back all the way to 2009. Back when originally published, the idea of recording player data to gather fairly accurate information about behavioural traits was very much in its infancy. Now, in 2019, any publisher working on a live service game will have entire data science divisions dedicated to player analytics and other heavily data-driven fields. It's an entire facet of game development that has only really emerged in the last 5 to 10 years. These teams can be focused perhaps on individual titles or all titles under one publisher. Analytics of player data is equally applicable to your behaviour around monetization as it is for any other in-game activity. Now, this has been happening, especially in mobile games, for a few years now, such as identifying the types of products people buy and whether particular levels of a game are where most players are getting stuck, given it provides an ample point to sell a booster pack at a discounted rate. But there are already machine learning driven metrics regularly used when assessing a player's engagement in a particular game, and one of the most well-known examples is called churn prediction. Churn prediction is used in a variety of consumer services on the web, and it's used to identify when you, the customer, become a churner, meaning you're not going to continue to engage in a particular service and, more critically, you're not going to pay them for it. Hence, Amazon goes out their way to send you emails if you haven't bought anything in a while, or Netflix might encourage you to try out a new show if you haven't used your subscription and they're worried you're not going to renew. All of this in an effort to put your money back into their ecosystem. Now, churn prediction in games is identifying two key things related to players and microtransactions. First of all, identifying the ratio of churn within the game, where by examining in-game behaviour of all players, you can understand what proportion of the audience will spend money on microtransactions within a period of time, if ever. And secondly, the churn rate. At what point do players turn into churners? Churn prediction can be achieved using a variety of machine learning technologies that's kind of beyond the scope of this video, but it's readily possible. Once you combine this with player segmentation, where you cluster and categorize players based on specific attributes, ranging from in-game performance to your engagement with the monetization services, then you're getting to the interesting but also scary point. At an abstract level, the entire player base can be analysed to see what's happening. Where are the problems in the game? What balancing issues need to be addressed? But also, what monetization packages are proving popular and how many players are not spending money. Now, I don't like to be doom and gloom about AI on this show, and I rarely ever am. In fact, AI in games was built to challenge the stigma and bad reporting that surrounds artificial intelligence. But the problem is, AAA publishers are really embracing this stuff and they don't have a great track record with monetization as it is. Right now, we're in a position where at a top level decisions can be made to rebalance and tweak parts of a game, and in the context of monetization, edits can be made to the economy of a game such that things become easier or harder. Meanwhile, at present, new promotional products can be released into the economy and targeted towards players who have never spent money or spend very little money. This is a tactic that already exists within mobile gaming, given it's a little easier to make these changes so quickly and that it's appealing to a broader base of consumers that are a little less incensed by it all. Now, take this to the next logical step. This is the big conjecture part, by the way, where your machine learning prediction systems become ongoing real-time services, where a game can poll these analytics services to make judgments on what changes to make to the game you're playing to encourage you to spend money in real time. Said game is tweaking its economy and progression systems and even coming up with unique and bespoke products for you, this particular player, based on your current gameplay experience, and it's being driven by the analytics services that have been built. Does this sound scary? Yes. Is it far-fetched? I don't think so. Otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it. Don't forget, in 2017, Activision was granted a patent based on ideas of manipulating matchmaking to encourage use of microtransactions. be that to give you an advantage in the game or just to force you to play against opponents with cooler outfits or costumes. How do you think such a system would be able to identify what brackets you fall into for the matchmaking process? This, right here, is what I'm worried about. Imagine games are being tailored to appeal to both casual and more hardcore players, with the in-game monetization prioritising specific aspects of player behaviour within those sectors. Perhaps for the more hardcore, it's offering better deals on cosmetics, while the more casual audiences are getting better affordances for progression, given they want to avoid a grind that's being artificially inflated in real time. I can see this happening in mobile, given, as I said, mobile audiences aren't typically as actively engaged in the media that surrounds a game, plus many of these games are actually isolated individual titles without a larger multiplayer meta that players are communally trying to establish. Plus, there are products out there offering machine learning driven analytics for mobile developers. Again, I recognise the value of it, but all it takes is for one stupidly popular game to figure out how to take this down a dark road and pull it off. Naturally, I'm worried about my hobby, or whatever my relationship to games has become in recent years, but this could be a real red flag that could impact more vulnerable individuals who are skirting around games that have been soaked in microtransaction models. There needs to be a better understanding of what these systems can do and how they're being employed in particular games. Would legislation help? Perhaps. But governments are often slow to understand how technology works, and then make the most heavy-handed and ill-judged decisions. This is why we're in this situation to begin with, given nobody really noticed the effect all this is having on games and their players until now. Plus, if you consider my two biggest audiences on this channel, the US and the UK, I don't think either country can really advocate for how clued in their governments are when it comes to protecting the well-being of their citizens from technological upheaval. Ugh, just getting depressed thinking about it. Is this all being blown out of proportion? I'd like to think so, but on the other hand, this is an idea that I can imagine investors are salivating at the prospect of. Right now, there's next to no consumer protection or appropriate guidance given when using these sorts of practices, particularly loot boxes. Only now, at the time of writing this video, did news break that platform holders will start to release the odds of loot boxes several years after they flooded the market. It's a start, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Either way, I think it's real food for thought, and while this is a bit of a detour from regular episodes of Design Dive, I think it's something I needed to talk about. But don't sweat, I'll be back talking about video games in the more traditional sense in the next Design Dive episode. Be sure to subscribe, as after 2 years I'm returning to Dark Souls next month, as I talk about my time playing Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, as I continue my rather personal journey through that series. That's it for this episode of Design Dive, part of my work here on AI in Games that is sponsored by these wonderful folks you see on screen now. Join the AI in Games Patreon or become a member of the YouTube channel to help support my work. Thanks for watching, stay safe, have fun, I'll be back.